I was at Kol Tikva Synagogue last night, our sister congregation in Woodland Hills, and they have a custom of wearing white, and I did that. I don't have a white tie. So it was my first high holidays in, 40 years where I didn't have a tie on. It's kind of liberating, I have to say, but here I am. It's nice to see so many of you here. It's nice to see faces that I haven't seen in a while. We are old friends from the years that we've been together. So I want to tell you a story, the likes of which, well, you've probably heard, and maybe even we've been through those moments together. But I'm hoping that this time, with this telling, you'll draw meaning from the story that changes your life. Ivan was my wife's longtime colleague at the Los Angeles Jewish Federation. They became quite close. From time to time, Ivan and his wife and Becky and I would get together. He was as devoted to fitness as I am, so we enjoyed sharing our passions for biking and skiing and working out. And so when my wife got the text from his wife that during one of those workouts, Ivan had suffered a cardiac arrhythmia and never regained consciousness, it hit us hard. The unimaginable, the unpredictable, the incomprehensible had happened. Ivan's wonderful family lost their rock. My wife, along with so many others, lost a dear friend. And all of us were forced to contemplate that which was previously unimaginable, a future without him. So I say that because you've heard this story before. You've experienced it with friends or family members, people who were seemingly in the paragon of health. Things were going well, their lives were together, and something happens and changes everything. Someone who, by all logic, shouldn't face illness, and suddenly lives end and lives change, and a world that people imagine going forward is a very different world now. So how do you prepare for that? How do you prepare for that which you actually can't anticipate at all? At Ivan's funeral, my valued colleague, Rabbi Joseph Kanefsky, shared a story that places things, or he sought to place things in perspective through the vision of the Talmud. It goes like this. Ages ago, a child was asked by their parents to climb a ladder and retrieve eggs from a bird's nest. Heeding their request, the child ascended the ladder, shooed the birds away as the Torah commanded, collected the eggs, and as the child turned to descend the ladder gave way, the child tumbled to the ground and died. How could it happen? Asked the rabbis of the Talmud 1,500 years ago. The child was actually obeying two mitzvot, honoring parents and shooing away the mother bird. Shouldn't God's beneficence, at the very least, offer some protection? The rabbi's response, the child was climbing a rickety ladder. One can never rely on miracles. So Rabbi Kanefsky went on and found his own meaning in the story. He said, the world is a rickety ladder. We can never protect ourselves from all of life's dangers. Most days, the ladder holds us up, but sometimes it gives way, allowing one of us to tumble to the ground. So, Ivan's ladder of life gave way. His family was forced to face a future without him. On October 6th of last year, we went to sleep, believing that we'd wake up to a world that was very much the same as the one we closed our eyes on. Instead, we rose to unimaginable terror, unfathomable acts of violence and mayhem. And before we even had a chance to fully assimilate what happened in Israel, our own sense of security in this country was radically upended. And as the war on three fronts continues in Israel, as an election in this country looms, the result of which will leave some of us satisfied and others of us incensed, we're left very fearful. Whether from within, the truth is that whether from within our own bodies or events beyond our control, What we have experienced acutely and especially this past year is that our lives can be turned upside down in an instant. As a result, I forgive you if you're sometimes feeling fearful. The world's a fearful place. And it seems like we're barraged often with so much information and misinformation that it's easy to be overwhelmed by fear. But here's the truth, and that's what the fearmongers know. Fear motivates. My colleague, Rabbi Josh Noble, observed last week that fear is natural and normal, but when it disproportionately drives our decisions and becomes our master, we don't only lose control, but we lose a measure of sanity to boot. It's not unknown to our people, that feeling. Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav spoke these words of truth to his own followers in the face of their world's dangers. It's a song. I'm tempted to sing it, but more of you will walk out. Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar ma'od v'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. All the world is a narrow bridge. The essential idea is not to be overcome with fear, said that rabbi. Yeah, life is a rickety ladder. How do we prepare for the inevitable falls? Interestingly and powerfully, Ivan set an example for us in his own life. See, at the LA Federation, he was in charge of the Community Security Initiative. Along with a team of experts, Ivan dedicated himself to keeping all of us, the Los Angeles Jewish community, safer. The CSI advised Jewish institutions about threats from the sources that could very likely endanger us. They advised and they trained us so that we could better protect you when we gather and your children from harm when we gather. In fact, our team at WISE just went through a training offered by the CSI that Ivan started. How ironic. This man, whose very life was dedicated to protecting us all, could never anticipate the ticking time bomb in his own body. So what can you take away? In the face of life's unknowns, we have to plan. We have to plan well. That's the only way to be prepared for whatever lies ahead. And at the same time, the planning can't be fear-driven. The awareness of life's fragility should motivate us, but it shouldn't petrify us. So we just heard the words that we hear throughout the holidays: who by fire, who by water, who by sword, who, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know it by heart. You've heard it so many times. The Talmudic lesson of that rickety ladder, and the rabbis knew exactly what they were saying when they gave us this story all those years ago, teaches us, though we might like there to be a connection between virtue and piety and life's outcomes, the correlation often is elusive. So I'd like to suggest that maybe there's a deeper truth that we can pull out of the holy days. Life is filled with uncertainty, and all outcomes are possible. The blessings and the curses are equally possible. That's not news to you, but the tradition hammers it home every year. Because the message is, even though you know it, you have to act on it. Don't wait. The tradition says, get your life in order now so you're ready for tomorrow. So for a moment, consider your own life trajectory. You're in your 20s, your 40s, your 60s, your 80s. How many times did important and complex things turn out exactly as you expected? If you're lucky, once. Most of us, never. How often were you required to pivot, reevaluate, and adapt to changing circumstances? How many times were you caught without a plan when you should have had one? There's a book in the Bible called Kohelet. It picks up a lot of the themes that I'm introducing here. It's set as the musings of a middle-aged man. And through it he asks, what's the purpose of all I do on the earth? What's the purpose of all my labors, the accumulation of wealth? What have I really gained? V'hine hakol hevel ut ruach, he says, behold, all is futile and in pursuit of wind. Nothing we do amounts to much. Even our best efforts can be subverted, says the sage. And at the same time, he counters that with a dissonant phrase. Hachacham einav barosho, v'skil b'choshech holech. A wise person has eyes in their head, whereas a fool walks in the darkness. Know where you're going, says Kohelet. Plan so you don't fill your days with vain pursuits. And he is acutely aware of where he's going. He says, Tov lelechet lebeit avel. It's better to go to a house of mourning than a house of feasting. For that is the end of every person, and the living should take heart. Now, his musings are provocative and compelling, but ultimately, even reading these ancient words should compel us to contemplate our own life trajectory. The next few minutes, I want to share some insights from Jewish tradition, from modern wisdom, and some brief stories. All this with the goal of exploring what I think Ben Franklin meant when he wrote these really wise words. A long life may not be good enough, but a good life is often long enough. Erik Erikson, the renowned social psychologist — I was a psych major in college, so that was hammered into my brain — identified studies of human life and suggested that we must successfully resolve these conflicting potential experiences in life to reach the next stage. So let's start with early adulthood. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but this is for you, the 19 to 29-year-olds. I'm addressing you. And also, Erikson wrote in the last century, in the middle part of the last century, so shift the ages as is appropriate for our times. Your challenge, 19 to 29-year-olds, young adults, is to resolve the conflict between intimacy on one hand and isolation on the other. His advice: take the time to form close, mature bonds with others, whether marital connections or lasting friendships, because successful relationships depend upon a willingness to sacrifice for the sake of others. And his concept wasn't lost on Jewish tradition. Many of you who are married have a ketubah. Some of you might even have a traditional ketubah with the Aramaic, the original Aramaic language. Chances are you haven't translated it, so I'm going to tell you what it says. It was, and still is in traditional Jewish circles, the original prenup. It's all about finances, who owes what whom. So imagine this: on their wedding day, surrounded by family and friends singing joyously, the groom marches towards his bride, arrayed in her white throne with her family around her, and into her hands he places a divorce contingency. How romantic! This is not a not so subtle reminder that marriages are agreements that can fail. For a marriage to succeed, it needs a plan. And that plan includes a range of commitments that have to be upheld throughout a couple's married life. As I tell every couple I counsel, you can never coast through your marriage. You always have to work. Our modern versions of ketubah don't have that divorce contingency. The state takes care of that. But they convey an actual compelling marital plan with more flowery, beautiful language. Here's an example of one, just a quick snippet. Some of you might even have the language hanging in your house. As we embark on life's journey, we promise to love, cherish, encourage, and inspire one another. Our hearts fuse together, creating a unique bond with friendship and compassion at its core. And through this union, we vow to value and support each other, always striving to sensitively respond to each other's needs. Signed by witnesses, it hangs on the wall. It's a permanent reminder of a plan that they have for successful marriage. Is it easy to keep the plan? A lot of you can attest to the fact that it's not. Marriage is hard. Marriages don't all survive. But divorce, too, is a plan. It allows both partners to remove themselves from an unhealthy dynamic. And sometimes the best plans in life are to create new ones. So his next stage, Erickson that is generativity versus stagnation. That's most of us in here, 30 to say 65 or so. It's a time when we're building our lives, focusing on careers, families, our contributions to society. If you have kids, Erickson asked, and I asked too, what's your plan for parenting? Now, how do we parent knowing full well that life is a rickety ladder? Now, the last thing we ever want to do is implant in our children panic for all life's dangers and difficulties. But we do want to create resilient kids because life has inevitable challenges. So I read something recently by Russell Shaw. He's a lifelong educator, had a school and a parent. And he said he identified 3 types of parents. There's the helicopter parent. There's, now depending upon your climate, the lawnmower or the snowplow parent, pick your preference. And then there's the lighthouse parent. The helicopter parent, you've seen them. They're always hovering, catching the child before they fall, revising school projects before they're submitted. There's the lawnmower parent, the one who inappropriately smooths their kid's path through life. My kid deserves special treatment over anybody else in school because my kid is special. So Shaw says that over a career of observing parents and their adult children, the most resilient adults are the ones whose parents are lighthouses. His words. Lighthouse parents provide firm boundaries and emotional support while allowing their children the freedom to navigate their own challenges. They demonstrate that they trust their kids to handle difficult situations independently. The key is learning when to step back to let them find their own way. As children grow, parents move from the role of boss to that of consultant. I'm going to ask you again, what's your parenting plan? What would it mean for you to become a lighthouse parent so your kids become more skilled at navigating life? The Talmud famously requires a parent to teach their child to swim. It doesn't require a parent to drain the entire ocean. So as your kids become adults and start their own families, perhaps, and pursue their own careers, how will your parenting change? What do they need from their parents? As your family ages and your kids leave the house, how will you change your parenting? Now, Erickson says that one of the challenges in this stage is the risk of stagnation. How do we not stagnate when our parenting days are over? What's your plan for how you'll fill your lives as an empty nester? So another quick story. I'm on the board of Hope the Mission. It's one of the largest providers of services to the homeless in our county. So I'm the only rabbi, in fact, the only religious functionary on the board, and so they said, would you start the next meeting with a prayer? They asked me about 20 minutes before the meeting started, so I said, I'm going to actually turn it around on them. I'm going to ask the board members to reflect on how their own spiritual needs are met by serving on the board of this purpose-driven organization. I took a chance. The chance I took was that their answers would be inspirational. Turns out I was right. These adults, many over 40, most over 50, were deeply spiritually nurtured by their support for this organization. An organization that brings redemption and uplift for those who have fallen through the cracks in our society. So here's this board, multi-generational, politically, ethnically, religiously diverse, who find common cause and collective spiritual enrichment from serving to meet the needs of life for so many. So, okay, empty nesters, what do you have to give, and by giving, also receive? Our communities are deeply in need of volunteers and contributors. You have incredible skills and wisdom. You've accumulated them as you've matured. You can sustain the organizations that are committed to reweaving the broken fabric of our society. So now the last stage. This one's tough for a lot of folks to talk about. It's a time when we contemplate our life accomplishments and our legacy. It's a time when life's end is in sight. A personal story. My father-in-law was the consummate life planner. So many of his choices showed us that he was really thinking about his life from the beginning to the end. He shared his financial plans with us. He taught us about the importance of pensions and savings, of insurance, of wills and trusts. But he also went beyond that. He also shared his deep love of the Jewish people. We often sat together in synagogue where he would sing loudly and so off-key, even I heard it. He took us on tours of Jewish New York City and said, I did this here, this happened here, I was here, and this happened, I was here, and this happened. All the Jewish places that were in his memories. Before his first heart surgery, he wrote a letter, a 2-page ethical will. And as they wheeled him in, he placed it in the hands of his son and my wife, his daughter, and he said, hold on to this, just in case. And on the pages, he shared his pride in their accomplishments. He affirmed their choices of spouses. Thank God. He asked them to care for their mother, told them how much he hoped they'd always hold on to their Jewish souls and their Judaism. His favorite expression, and he used to say it all the time, and we sang it together just earlier. He used to pinch my son Noah's cheeks when he was a year old. L'dor vador, from the moment he was born. L'dor vador, oy, l'dor vador, he'd say, from one generation to the next. Well, the surgery gave him 12 years, another 12 years. Becky still has that letter. She takes it out every Yom Kippur and she reads it, and every time she reads it, she cries. And I know that she tries to live her life in fulfillment of the letter her father left her and the life he lived to show her how to make the wise choices in her own life. So I'm going to ask you, what plans do you have for your own aging? What memories will you leave your family after you're gone? Have you considered how your declining years will impact your family? Do you have a plan to make it easier for them? So finally, here's an invitation for a plan that spans generations, one that is relevant to all of us as a result of this past year. We are gravely concerned about Israel's future and anxious about the status, about our status, our hard-won status in this country. So Bret Stephens wrote in an editorial recently, he did a recounting of, unfortunately, incidents over the past year about the surging anti-Semitism that comes from the left and the right. And writing in the New York Times, not the Forward, not the Jewish Journal, the New York Times publicly, he declared to the world that he's going deeper into his Jewish identity. He's doubling down, tripling down on being Jewish. That Judaism, he said, to the world, is a priceless, moral, spiritual, intellectual, and emotional inheritance. He'd also declared that he will participate even more enthusiastically in the continuing building of Israel. In essence, he shared his plan with the world for resilience in the face of what the world is throwing at us these days. I urge you to consider his words well. Let them become a part of your plan for the year ahead. Because our answer to the anti-Semites, to the Israel haters, to the misguided confabulous of false narratives, must be to become experts in our own identity and our own history. We have to know what we're talking about. So I ask you to take my words to heart. The fragility of our lives is difficult. It's a difficult notion to entertain. But we humans, we climb rickety ladders. But a life well planned is a life well lived. You have hopes and dreams. Share them. Make your plans. Share them. Discuss them at the dinner table. Discuss them when you gather with friends. Not all the time. Might be a little bit of a downer. But once in a while, share them. Explore them with your children. Tell them what your plans are. And make your plan for the end. Kohelet tells us we know where we're going. So in that way, we strengthen the rungs of that rickety ladder, not only for ourselves in life, but, and perhaps most importantly, for those who will remember us after we're gone. May you be written for life, for health, and fulfillment in the year ahead. Amen.